Sometimes language holds on to phrases that sound completely ridiculous when you stop and think about them. A storm rolls in, the rain starts pounding the streets, and someone casually says a line people have repeated for centuries. It's raining cats and dogs. It's dramatic, memorable, and oddly specific, but it also raises a strange image. After all, rain comes from clouds, not a sudden avalanche of household pets. So how did such a bizarre expression become one of the most recognizable ways to describe a heavy downpour? And more importantly, where did it even come from in the first place? Today we're exploring the strange history behind that question, right here, on History of Simple Things. Before digging into the origin, it helps to understand what the phrase is supposed to convey. When someone says it's raining cats and dogs, they're simply describing extremely heavy rain. It's an exaggerated expression meant to emphasize how intense the downpour is. English is full of these kinds of dramatic weather phrases. People might say it's pouring, bucketing down, or coming down in sheets. These expressions aren't literal descriptions. They're vivid imagery designed to make the weather sound more dramatic. Raining cats and dogs fits right into that tradition. The phrase creates a ridiculous mental image that immediately communicates the same idea. The rain isn't light or gentle, it's absolutely coming down hard. The phrase itself is far older than many people realize. Written evidence shows that similar versions of the expression existed in the 1600s. In 1651, the poet Henry Vaughan wrote about a roof that was secure against dogs and cats rained in shower. Just a year later, playwright Richard Brome used a similar line in his comedy The City Wit, writing that it would rain dogs and polecats. These early examples show that the idea of animals raining during storms was already being used metaphorically in English literature. By the early 1700s, the phrase had evolved into the version we recognize today. One of the most famous appearances came in 1738, when writer Jonathan Swift used rain cats and dogs in his satirical work, a complete collection of genteel and ingenious conversation. Swift's writing helped popularize the phrase, and from there it gradually spread into everyday speech. One of the most widely discussed explanations connects the phrase to the terrible sanitation of early modern cities. In 17th and 18th century England, streets were often dirty, crowded, and poorly drained. Garbage, waste, and even dead animals could accumulate in the open gutters. When heavy rainstorms hit, water rushed through the streets like temporary rivers, sweeping debris along with it. Historical descriptions of these floods mention animal carcasses being carried through the water. In his 1710 poem, A Description of a City Shower, Jonathan Swift describes stormwater washing dead animals through the streets, along with mud and waste. Some historians think this imagery may have inspired the phrase. People watching floodwater carrying animal bodies through the streets could have jokingly said it looked as if the storm had literally rained cats and dogs. Another theory suggests the phrase might be the result of a linguistic misunderstanding. Some scholars believe cats and dogs could have evolved from an older word, Catadupe. In early English usage, Catadupe referred to a waterfall or powerful cascade of water. The term ultimately came from Greek and Latin words used to describe the cataracts of the Nile River. Over time, if people heard or misinterpreted the word Catadupe, it could have gradually transformed into something more familiar: cats and dogs. Language changes constantly, and phrases often evolve through mispronunciation or reinterpretation. While there's no definitive proof this is the origin, It offers a plausible explanation for how a phrase about waterfalls might have turned into one about animals falling from the sky. Some explanations reach even further back into folklore. In Norse mythology, the storm god Odin was often associated with dogs and wolves, which symbolized the wind and violent storms. Meanwhile, European folklore frequently linked cats with mysterious or supernatural weather events. Witches were sometimes depicted traveling through storms alongside black cats, reinforcing the animal's connection with dark, turbulent weather. According to this interpretation, a storm described as raining cats and dogs might symbolically combine these two elements, wind and rain. While this theory is intriguing, most linguists consider it speculative. There's little direct evidence that the phrase developed specifically from mythology, but it does show how deeply animals were tied to people's interpretations of nature and weather. Despite all these theories, the honest answer is that no one knows the exact origin of the phrase. Many idioms develop gradually through everyday conversation rather than through a single identifiable moment. By the time linguists start studying them, the original meaning may already be lost. What we do know is that the phrase appeared in English writing by the mid-1600s and became widely recognized by the 18th century. From there, it spread through literature, conversation, and eventually education. Today, even people who rarely use the phrase still understand what it means. That alone shows how deeply it has embedded itself into the English language. Raining cats and dogs is a perfect example of how language preserves fragments of history, imagination, and everyday life all at once. The phrase might have been inspired by filthy city floods, ancient words that slowly changed over time, or simply the human tendency to exaggerate dramatic weather. Whatever its true origin, the expression survived for centuries because it paints such a vivid picture. In the end, the phrase reminds us that language doesn't always have to be logical. Sometimes the strangest expressions are the ones that stick around the longest. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.